Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. I know I didn't do a live stream for a few days, and I'm going to try to keep this live stream as topical as possible. Hold on, let me just mute this. New Year. I know I didn't do a live stream. I always forget to do that, so sorry about that. I'm going to try to keep it as topical as possible, so I'm going to try not to read the chat till the end. I'm going to wait a little bit to get into the topic, because I want to let a few people get into the room. I don't know how many people are gonna come in, because of course it's New Year's Day, and obviously there's a lot of other things going on. There's a college football playoff. There's some other streams going on, but this is a topic I think you should check out, and I'll explain to you why. We've been talking about for a while a lot of these legal issues that they're using to tie up the Trump administration and the media with this Robert Mueller investigation, the special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. I was about to say 1996, and it's a slip of the tongue, because you'll probably see soon that a lot of what we're going to be talking about has to do with 1996. So I'm going to try to read the chat at the end. For anybody that joins, please put in your comments questions about what we're talking about. Obviously I like it when you guys comment, tell me things that are going on, or, even troll comments, which are kind of funny, but, and which I guess I'll get those anyway if people are trolling. But for this broadcast, I want to try to get people to really ask what's going on here, because this is something it's evaded the public attention for decades, and it's a real serious issue. And I'm hoping that with more exposure, this smokescreen that's being just spread around the Clinton White House and its allies will gradually dissipate, and people will finally have the clarity that they've been seeking for so long with regards to what happened under Bill Clinton, whether Donald Trump is should be investigated for anything. These are real questions, and I'm not willing to concede anything that's going on right now based on what the media is saying about it. So what happened to cause me to write this blog post? Now, it's at the Strutting Leopard blog. Okay, that's my personal blog, and you can see it. It's in the description. I'll show it on the screen for a second, just because I'm not gonna read right through it, but I'm gonna be using it kind of as notes for what we're talking about today. And it says, "New Year, old lies as David serves the Clintonian Goliath." And the David I'm talking about is Clinton's defense counsel during the 1990s, Mr. Or I guess David Kendall Esquire. I don't know how you address a lawyer, but David Kendall was one of Clinton's brilliant defense attorneys. I think the other one was Bill Bennett, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check on that. Either Bill Bennett or Bob Bennett. Let me see here. It was Bob Bennett. So these guys, they were able to defend President Clinton despite serious charges of misconduct on several counts. Among them, the Whitewater issue. There was and Bob Bennett is well known as a defense attorney for both parties. He defended people during the whole, what do you call it, the Iran-Contra scandal. So I want to ask some of these people. They're always saying, why are you being so skeptical of Robert Mueller? He's a registered Republican. They always say registered Republican. Well, Bob Bennett, who was Bill Clinton's lawyer, was a registered Republican. And David Kendall, who is the person in this article, wrote this article as represent Republicans. Now, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because in Washington, there's the only party that matters is the party that gives you business. So these people, they'll register with one political party, but essentially they represent themselves. And that's the way it is with people, regardless of whether they're lobbyists or bureaucrats or elected officials or, you know, law enforcement or city officials or whatever you want to, whoever we're talking about, media, they all represent, you know, their corporate interest or whatever. And this isn't a progressive talking. I'm talking about, I'm talking as somebody, I'm a very staunchly, uh, you know, anti-government person. I think the government should be reduced to the minimum amount of oversight, and more liberties and more liberties and freedom of expression should be given to the people, to the average citizen. So I'm not saying that because I'm against people making money. I'm saying that the idea that people are because of their party affiliation or because of their profession as a law enforcement agent would be honest, like they say about Robert Mueller, is preposterous. Robert Mueller is a person who helped George Bush craft the Patriot Act, or at least enforce it, and gave a lot of excuses for why so many abuses were occurring. So at that time, the Clinton or Democrat machine thought that he was pretty much part of the whole deep state, and they never. But apparently, in 2008 or 2009, when President Obama came to power, they forgot about that, and Mueller continued to serve because ultimately, these people, they're as long as they're comfortable with all the dirty shit going on behind the scenes, the FBI and other agencies with similar abusive histories are not going to bother them. But with somebody like Donald Trump, who is trying to do a number of things to reform the federal government, yeah, they'll definitely try to basically, you know, throw a few twigs in the spokes of his wheels, and as the meme goes, and that's what we've been seeing. So what did he say in this article? Well, basically, his article was titled "Leave Robert Mueller Alone." It says, and he attacks former independent counsel independent counsel Ken Starr, who proposed a reset of the Russian investigation, in which Congress steps up to establish a bipartisan investigative panel, and the executive branch's approach changes from criminal law enforcement to some kind of nebulous fact-finding. Despite its bland profession of respect for the probe, Starr's column was really just a subtler version of suddenly pervasive efforts by Trump apologists to undermine the investigation into Russian tampering with the 2016 election. The reasons given for Starr's reset are wholly specious. He's basically saying that this is the former defense attorney for Bill Clinton saying that the former prosecutor of Bill Clinton is a liar, and that he's just trying to ruin the investigation into Russian hacking. So I want you to understand this. In the 1990s, when I was growing up, there was a lot of shit going on with the Clintons, and Ken Starr was in the media every day, and he was coming into, he was basically almost as famous as President Clinton, who was the person he was prosecuting, and the media was kind of portraying him as some sort of bumbling fool, and he kind of was. And they were saying that the investigation had led nowhere. Well, that's not exactly true. Now, in my piece, I don't even go into all the shenanigans that went on with Whitewater and with Vince Foster. I kind of only hint at them. And you know, if I had 5 days of vacation instead of 3, and I wasn't working just on this weekend, I would have probably gone pretty far in depth on those too. But you know, it's a lot for one blog post. And for those of you joining, you should check out that blog post if you have a chance. It's in the description. You can read along too. Although I'm not going to be reading it directly, but you'll see what I'm talking about. The Russia investigation was founded on much more shaky ground, thin ice, than everything that was used to try to bring down Bill Clinton. And I'll admit there were some things that looked like they were just meant to bring down Bill Clinton, but they were solid. They were solid accusations. Whitewater was a real thing. The thing that triggered Whitewater was Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan, a bank that the Clintons had been invested in through a friend named James McDougal, Tim McDougal. And it did go belly up, and there was fraud, and they were very much involved. And Hillary Clinton worked as a lawyer, as counsel for McDougal and Madison Guaranty Savings and Loan. And she was very deeply involved. And in fact, she perjured herself under oath, claiming that she didn't know about a certain matter related to Whitewater, the actual Whitewater development. This was kind of a shitty, development in Arkansas, where they were trying to develop some housing over there, some I guess upscale resort housing that never got built, and the investors never got their money back. Well, who was the person who put together all the paperwork for one of those projects called Castle Grande that was part of Whitewater? It was Hillary Rodham Clinton. So essentially, the real reason that any of the Clinton scandals happened was not necessarily because of Bill Clinton, although I'm not saying he's an innocent man. But what happened was that there was already enough smoke coming from what Hillary Clinton was doing with her investments, and Bill Clinton was connected to her financially, obviously, as her husband, that there needed to be an investigation. Later, another person involved in that matter, Webb Hubbell, who was her law partner at the Rose Law Firm, I mentioned that in the blog post, he was indicted for stealing money from the Rose Law Firm. And there were other members of the Rose Law Firm that came to the White House with Hillary Clinton, not mentioned necessarily in the blog article, but Bill Kennedy, another counsel in the White House, part of the White House legal team, was a law partner of Hillary Clinton's at the Rose Law Firm. And, the famous Vince Foster, Mr. Suicide in a Park I've Never Been To, was also one of Hillary Clinton's best friends in private and public life. He was also a fellow partner at the Rose Law Firm. There are allegations, and I'm not going to say whether they're true or not, but they're funny, that Hillary Clinton had an affair with Vince Foster and or Webb Hubbell. And the Webb Hubbell affair is, that's the fun. I mean, it's the funnier one if you just see a picture of him. But that's going down a little grassy path that is not necessary for today. You can explore that on your own time, and it's kind of distracting to the real problem here, which is that you have David Kendall, who was Bill Clinton's defense lawyer, trying to defend the special counsel Robert Mueller in the Washington Post. Now, I can understand if some of you don't know why that's important, okay? And I'm not looking at the chat right now. I said at the beginning, so I don't know if you're commenting or not, but please put any questions you have in the comments, because it might be a little confusing, and I don't know how long it's going to take me. I don't want to go too late tonight. I still want to watch a little movie I was watching earlier, but I think I was watching Rogue One. My memory's slipping a little. I'm still pretty sick too. I'm still drinking this whiskey tea, which I'm not complaining about. I love the whiskey tea, but I hate the sick. I hate the illness. I think I was told yesterday I have some sort of virus. Went for a strep swab and it came out negative, so they said it's a virus. So I'll tell you what are the issues with this, okay? First of all, replacing the independent counsel, you have to take into account that in the 90s, Ken Starr wasn't the first independent counsel, so you can replace the independent. In fact, the special prosecutor, what Kendall fails to mention, because it doesn't help his case, is that the special counsel is actually a worse standing for the prosecution than an independent counsel. Okay, there's a difference. The special counsel is appointed by the Department of Justice. In the case of Robert Mueller, it's the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who himself is a big figure of controversy right now. And for President Clinton, that person was Robert Fisk originally, and he was appointed by Janet Reno, who was the Attorney General. Now, nobody said that there's a conflict of interest for Janet Reno, who was Clinton's political appointment to appoint Robert Fisk. The truth is that Janet Reno didn't really work on his campaign. So yeah, Jeff Sessions might have been right to recuse himself. But it's still, when you have the Attorney General who is appointed by the president appointing a special counsel, then yeah, it's not as good as an independent counsel. Now, why is it called an independent counsel? Because those are usually, or when they existed, they were appointed by a federal judge. I think it was a federal judge committee in the District of Columbia. So it's the D.C. Circuit courts. They would come together and vote on the independent counsel. Not that it happened very often, obviously, but in 1994, it was determined that Robert Fisk and his investigation did not have enough of an authority to actually probe what was going on with the Clintons. They were also botching a lot of their work. They weren't properly giving the weight to what was happening with the Foster investigation, with Whitewater, and it was decided that Clinton himself agreed to appoint an independent counsel. He agreed to an appointment, and he recommended, surprise, surprise, that they keep Robert Fisk as the independent counsel. What did they do? They appointed Kenneth Starr. Now, immediately, people started, casting aspersions on Starr's ability to really be an impartial investigator. He'd been George Bush's Solicitor General, which is an official in the Justice Department that represents the federal government and the Supreme Court. So people started to say, oh, this guy is a Republican operative. He's a registered Republican. He can't be independent. The fact of the matter is, however, that a lot of the lawyers and staff on Kenneth Starr's committee, in his group, were Democratic operatives like Mark Towey, who was the second in command. So did anybody complain that those people would tamper with the investigation? Well, nobody in the mainstream media, but some people believe that Towey did tamper with the investigation into the Vince Foster death. Okay? So there you go. It doesn't matter how the independent counsel or special counsel is appointed, you're still going to have people casting aspersions on it. Now, another issue that isn't brought up is that not only was the Clinton investigation in turmoil because prosecutors were changed, but also because defense counsel was changed. One of the people the person who was President Clinton's chief lawyer at the beginning wasn't David Kendall or Bob Bennett. It was the official White House counsel, Bernie Nussbaum. And I believe that Nussbaum was replaced at some point. I think he had to resign because of his own misconduct concerning records and the FBI Filegate hearing. So his own lawyer, President Clinton's own lawyer, had to resign. So he was succeeded by Lloyd Cutler. Okay, so those are the people. They're the official. They represent the White House. Okay, they represent the White House. They're not President Clinton's personal attorney. Okay, now, so Cutler was then replaced by Abner Mikva, and the rest is basically it's history. There's a lot of these people that they did their jobs as the White House counsel, but Bernie Nussbaum was a Hillary Clinton acolyte, and he was also implicated at one point for basically helping her do some misconduct during the Watergate investigation in the 70s. So they went way back. So, we are getting a little complicated here. But long story short, the idea that you can't replace the independent counsel or the special counsel is ridiculous. So Starr replaced somebody else. He replaced Robert Fisk because Congress realized that you needed somebody with more authority in order to properly investigate Whitewater and all of the other, mushrooming scandals under Clinton, which were, by the way, far more than have happened under Donald Trump. I mean, I mentioned in my blog post, yes, there's the Kingfisher Energy scandal that they talk about, which I think is kind of a real scandal under Donald Trump. Okay, so I'm not saying that there aren't any scandals under Donald Trump that are worth investigating. The fact is, I don't think that those will end up getting him convicted or impeached. Some of them are pretty far removed from him. This weekend, the whole sexual assault stuff has kind of gone into the river and died with this whole David Brock shit that's going on, which we're going to try to get to at the end. But in any case, you have to understand that the independent counsel can be replaced, or the special counsel can be replaced, and you can bring somebody else. Now, so Starr became independent counsel. He stayed in that position until 1999. He was then replaced in 1999 after he stepped down by a guy named Robert Ray. And Ray continued investigating into the mid-2000s after Clinton was already out of office. So you see that Starr replaced somebody else, and he was replaced himself. Admittedly, because he stepped down, he was tired of investigating Clinton after 6 years, and Congress didn't do its job and convict him. The FBI didn't do its job properly investigate him, as we're about to talk about in the next segment. And as far as the rest of the look, Kenneth Starr was, I believe, incompetent and mishandled the investigation, and he's admitted that he mishandled several parts of the investigation. But the crimes were there, and it was proven that President Clinton had lied under oath about the Lewinsky scandal. Unfortunately, Starr was incompetent at convicting him of some of the more serious crimes, which we're about to get to. So another issue that I want to talk about that Kendall touches on is how he says that it's only Fox News and conservative wingnuts that are attacking the independent special counsel Robert Mueller, and that basically, it's just a bunch of conspiracy shit, and that Robert Mueller's investigation has full integrity, and that it's wrong to attack the prosecutor. Well, if you look at what happened in the 90s, President Clinton's spin doctor, James Carville, who is famous, he has that Red Skull head. It looks like Red Skull from Captain America. He goes on TV all the time. I still think he's on TV once in a while. I don't really watch TV, but he came out and declared all-out war against Ken Starr. The same as he said that against Paula Jones when she sued President Clinton, that if you drag a $100 bill through a trailer park, there's no telling what you'll find. That was the type of tactics they used. They used scorched earth media tactics, attacked everybody that they could regarding allegations against President Clinton. So not just Carville, but a number of people, they went to work attacking Ken Starr, trying to call him crooked or he was an idiot, or that he was a Puritan. In fact, I brought up, and I have the video in the blog of Michael Moore's TV show, Awful Truth, from, it should be Awful More, but it was on the BBC, and the first episode was dedicated towards undermining Ken Starr. And the first thing that they did was show up at Ken Starr's house, dressed up as pilgrims, and shame him for putting out the Starr report, which contained a lot of very sexy shit that they were making fun of him for. They were saying, oh, you're only attacking Bill Clinton because he had marital, he had extramarital relations, and you're a bunch of Puritans. Well, that's not really what happened. Okay, President Clinton had a workplace relationship with an intern who he claimed stalked him, even though he used all these hoops and all these different methods to get her into the White House. Even after she'd been moved out of the White House into the Pentagon, he still found ways to get her in improperly, without Secret Service permission and with no official reason to be there. He did everything in his power to have this affair, in many cases, the risks that he took were, very, very, very irresponsible. First of all, because his wife has a volatile temper and was known to be abusive towards him, physically abusive. It's been reported on several occasions that Hillary Clinton has attacked Bill Clinton physically. It's not like we see Bill Clinton beat in public all the time, but one can imagine. I mean, that in families where that happens, it happens behind the scenes. So with Bill Clinton, so why is that such a big deal? Well, it's not just the fact that he did all these things behind the backs of his staff and deceived them, and he lied to them after the scandal hit the press and told his own staff that he didn't have sex with Monica Lewinsky. So that's just the sex part. The denial part was the real problem, because when it came down to the legal issues, President Clinton and David Kendall and Bob Bennett had Monica Lewinsky sign a sworn affidavit that she didn't have sex with Bill Clinton, didn't have a sexual relationship with Bill Clinton. And essentially, they've compelled her to lie under oath and commit perjury. So, in order to preserve his own political career, the President of the United States forced an intern to lie under oath and potentially risk going to prison. I think that the penalty of perjury is something like 2 years or something. But still, he basically he used this woman and almost put her in prison. And that's why she eventually had to reverse her testimony and admit that she had an affair with Bill Clinton after the blue dress with the cum on it came out. The jizzy blue dress is the only reason we know of any of this. And unfortunately, all this stuff where people think that Monica Lewinsky was the big scandal of the Clinton era, well, the only reason for that is because there was DNA evidence of it. Now, for the other stuff I'm about to talk about, there's actually much more concrete evidence than a bunch of jizz on a dress. Okay? So, people can laugh and say that the whole Clinton investigation, it only turned up Monica Lewinsky. But if you look at the public record, if you look at Senate hearings and other public developments that happened during that era, not later, it is known that Bill Clinton committed crimes that were far worse than anything that Michael Moore made fun of. So another issue here is that we're comparing two people, Robert Mueller and Ken Starr. One of them was a federal judge and Solicitor General. That's Ken Starr. And the other was a lifelong prosecutor and head of the FBI. That's Robert Mueller. Now, I think that they have arguably similar competence to be prosecutors if you really look at it. But unfortunately, Robert Mueller, I think, is worse than Kenneth Starr. And Kenneth Starr wasn't good either. Kenneth Starr was not the best prosecutor. Obviously, if you look at the mountain of evidence that I'm about to show you regarding China, he basically fucked up bad. But Robert Mueller technically is a bit more qualified, but he's also been complicit in putting together a lot of the stuff that was in the Patriot Act. And Bob Mueller, he worked under Obama and Bush to undermine the basic civil rights and privacy of millions of Americans, and he is part of that whole surveillance state of mind. And now that Donald Trump has accused the surveillance state of targeting him, well, I think Robert Mueller is not the correct person to be special prosecutor. It doesn't mean that that would color his uh, decision making necessarily, but he is directly implicated in a lot of this type of stuff. And I feel that to appoint him to begin with was a huge mistake. He was appointed because of the leaks, because Comey was trying to get a special prosecutor. He in several instances hinted that he wanted somebody like Robert Mueller, who's a personal acquaintance of him. Some say he's a friend. That's kind of disputed, but you know that there's enmity between Donald Trump and James Comey. So I think that it's very inappropriate to keep Robert Mueller in that type of keystone position right now. So let me just check what's going on. So there's an issue going on with this where they try to say that the FBI should not be targeted by people saying that it's unclean. Now, I'll have you know, there's a book here, and I have it right here. It's Unlimited Access by Gary Aldrich. I have a review up from my Clinton Library series, and Unlimited Access is by a former liaison with the FBI to the White House, Gary Aldrich, where he reveals a lot of the shenanigans that went on in the White House, and he actually goes through some of these issues where Clinton officials told him that neither they nor the Clintons themselves trusted the FBI or the Secret Service and believed that they were out to get them. And in one instance, he actually reported that Craig Livingston, who was the Clintons' White House Director of Security, their worker, he actually stated to Gary Aldrich that the Clintons were so distrustful of the FBI that he was going to propose, or distrustful of the Secret Service, that he was going to propose that the Secret Service be dissolved and merged into the FBI. So if you want to talk about people who have a distrust of law enforcement and a paranoia, Donald Trump doesn't even begin to get there. Now, yes, he has accused people of trying to surveil him because there's evidence of there being surveillance against him, and it's evident, or against his associates, and it's evidenced by the entrapment that was perpetrated against Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor designate. That was surveillance that revealed only one thing, that he had a conversation with the Russian ambassador. By the way, he also had conversations with Israeli officials, as some of the wackos love to point out that because Israel contacted him, it's actually Israeli collusion, they try to say. But he had communications with a lot of foreign officials, because as the designated national security advisor, that's kind of what you do. And then they said that he did not, he lied under oath, or I guess he lied to the FBI during their investigation and said, no, I didn't talk to the Russian investigator or the Russian ambassador. So that's his problem. If Michael Flynn did something like talk to the Russian ambassador, he shouldn't have lied about it to the FBI, because he's perfectly allowed to do it as the designated national security advisor. Now, what Bill Clinton did was much worse, forcing his mistress to lie under oath, and then himself lying under oath about that. So Gary Aldrich, he exposed in many cases the duplicity of the Clintons, the fact that they did not screen a lot of the people that they brought into the White House, which by the way include a lot of Chinese officials, Chinese communist officials, who they feature prominently in a lot of the literature I'm reading right now. So you have this this Gary Aldrich, he spoke about it. He published his book Unlimited Access. And what did the Washington Post do back then? Well, did they trust an FBI agent who had been a liaison to the White House? No. What they did instead was they believed that David Brock, who had been a conservative smear campaigner until he flipped and went to the Clintons, when he said that Gary Aldrich was full of shit and that he was making stuff up and that he was a homophobe because Brock was gay, and that was it. That was it. And you know, from Aldrich's book, yeah, it sounds like, I mean, there's a couple segments where he's very sexually prudish, and he does say a few anti-gay things. That's not the point. The point is whether the things he says in his book are true. And for anybody to doubt that the Secret Service or the FBI are telling the truth when they say that the Clintons distrusted them or that they lied to them, or as Aldrich claims, the Clintons might have even slipped the Secret Service on several occasions, and which is also against protocol. For anybody to cast doubt on that, well, now why are you saying to us that we should trust the FBI and law enforcement when you said in the 90s, don't trust the FBI, don't trust the Secret Service, including Aldrich and Secret Service officer Gary Byrne, whose book I've also read. That's a very strange attitude. When it's convenient, you say don't trust these law enforcement agents or these Secret Service agents, FBI agents, Secret Service officers, whatever. You say don't trust them back in the 90s. What happened in 20 years? You suddenly change your tune, and you're saying, well, Robert Mueller, he has an impeccable resume. We should believe we have to believe his record. He was a registered Republican. Sure, it doesn't matter that he was completely complicit in the Bush administration's setting up of a domestic spying network, high-tech spying and surveillance of the public that the Obamas were also complicit in. And never mind that he's a registered Republican, so we should believe what he says. No, if you're sitting at home watching this right now or watching it later, always remember when they bring up registered party membership, you're talking about Washington D.C. Party membership is just it's almost like belonging to a different lodge in a different dining hall in college or something. At the end of the day, it's the same school that you drink from the same water fountains and you wear the same colors. That's Washington D.C. And anybody claiming that because Mueller is a registered Republican, you should believe his integrity, or the same thing with Comey, who for some reason is a liar when it comes to the Hillary Clinton investigation. When the Clintons say, oh, he ruined our chances of winning by reopening the investigation a week before the election. Well, whenever he says something negative about Trump, they hold him up like he's Joan of Arc or like he's friggin', Prince of the Revolution or something. So somebody who's he goes from it to shit in 1 second. That's how they relate to James Comey and Robert Mueller. Okay, so that's my point here. That people like Kendall, they'll pretend. David Kendall, again, if you're just joining, is the Clinton defense attorney who wrote a Washington Post article defending Mueller this week after he smeared. Him and his other associates under Clinton helped smear Ken Starr in the 90s. Not that Ken Starr was great, again, but they did the same thing in the 90s, undermined the independent counsel. Okay, and now they're saying, well, we have to let the process take course. Well, back in the 90s, there were real crimes and real evidence of crimes, and you didn't have that same attitude. You thought it was all about blowies and jizz on purple dresses, blue dresses, whatever. Well, that's not the case. So finally, we get to the last segment, talking about Russiagate. Russiagate, for those of you that think that there's a Russiagate, you're out of your damn minds. There's been no evidence presented. Anything that even hints at evidence is considered classified. And even the director of national intelligence under Obama, James Clapper, has stated to NBC, and I put the link in the blog post, saying, no, we don't have any direct evidence tying Trump to Russia. So what the fuck are you talking about? If any classified information did exist that linked Trump to Russia up until now, don't you think that some of these shifty FBI agents that you think are doing the Lord's work by leaking stuff to the press would have leaked it to the press? Because they haven't. There's been no documents leaked to the press. The press. Sorry, there's been nothing leaked out that substantiates it. So that's it. But with Clinton, there was ample evidence of links to China. Ing Seng, who was a mega donor at the time, back in the 90s, donating hundreds of thousands of dollars was considered mega donations. And Ing Seng, who was a government official in China, donated hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it was actually over $1.1 million through a straw donor to the Clinton campaign. Is that not collusion? Can somebody tell me what's more collusion than $1.1 million to the DNC through a restaurant owner from Arkansas that knew Bill Clinton? Okay, is that not more collusion than literally nothing about Donald Trump? So you have on one scale you have a mountain of evidence of Chinese donations to Bill Clinton, and on the other scale you have literally nothing. You have only innuendo and suggestions and speculation. I just watched an interview from earlier from the Real News, believe it or not, where they actually the Real News. I'll give them credit where the credit is due. They exploded the whole Trump Russia myth in about 30 minutes. The guy from the Guardian, I think his name was Luke Harding or something. he couldn't provide any evidence. There was nothing except his own prognostications based on his knowledge of the KGB and past Russian intelligence behavior. That's all that he brought. So he couldn't produce any actual ties between Trump and Russia, apart from all the stuff that we've seen about meetings and things like that didn't lead to anything. So then, besides Ing Seng and Charlie Tree, who was his straw donor, there was Johnny Chung, who admitted under oath that the money that he bundled came from the Chinese People's Liberation Army, and he was convicted in a federal court for campaign finance violations. And guess who was listed as the victim of the crime? It was the Democratic National Committee. Now, how do you suppose that you get? What's the logic of charging the person who received the donation as the victim of the crime? I would say that they're the beneficiary of the crime. Wouldn't you say? So then it says, when confronted with evidence, the Clintons were not forced to resign or take any further action besides returning the money, and the FBI investigation under Louis Freeh was so hampered that whistleblower Ivan Smith went public with his objections that it had been suppressed. According to the Chicago, so another angle on this was Commerce Secretary Ron Brown under Bill Clinton. Ron Brown was the DNC chair when Clinton got elected in 1992, and he became Commerce Secretary, and he was used to bundle a lot of this money from the Chinese, and he used this money, and he was very good at it. Now, once all this started to come to light, and people started to ask questions about why his children were employed by lobbyists, and why he was taking money, and why his income was so high. Ron Brown coincidentally died in a plane crash in Croatia in 1996. It's been very dubious. If you talk to some people or listen to some people online, such as the Doctor of Common Sense, highly recommend him. He's on Spreaker. They'll tell you that he was killed in a plane crash. Yet the forensic pathologists found that there was a gunshot wound to the head on his body and nobody else's, and his body was separated from the plane. So people like to say, well, whatever, what are you talking about? Well, don't you think we would have heard a little more about the death of the Commerce Secretary in 1996? It actually didn't receive any coverage. I don't remember a single thing about it. This was a cabinet level official who died in a plane crash in Croatia. So that's about it. All I have to say besides that, you know, the Washington Post. Once in a while, I wonder. Sometimes they look like they're getting better, but I think it's really a ruse, because you can never trust the publication that hired this snake, John Podesta, a guy who pretends that WikiLeaks documents were fake and whatever, even though he was caught in the documents, you know, saying all sort of derogatory shit and cooperating and, you know, coordinating with journalists. And it's been revealed this week that the coordination between Hillary, you know, the Hillary Clinton camp and journalists goes back to, I think, 2010. Yeah, when they hire people like that, it's time to stop trusting the Washington Post. When they have somebody like David Kendall, who was Bill Clinton's defense attorney defending Robert Mueller in the pages of the Washington Post, it's time to stop calling them the Washington Post and start calling them the Clintonian Post, because that's who they're defending. Okay, they have these Clinton gargoyles coming. Why are you hiring Clinton people for your editorial page, or featuring them, whatever you want to say? The Clintons lost. They lost the last election. They lost in 2008. They're gone. They should be gone. They should shut the fuck up and go away, and lay low. This is these are people that are the most brazen criminals in probably the history of American politics. And I'm sorry to say, but I don't think that even Donald Trump can clean this mess up. I think it really needs some sort of you know, actual revolution from within the federal agencies themselves, the FBI and the Secret Service and whatever. The lower ranking people have to say to their superiors, "Listen, I can do something else. I can say fuck this job and go into you know, private surveillance now, because there's plenty of that crap going on now with all the technology." That's about it. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me see if there were any comments. There were some bullshit comments before from Angel. Sorry about that, but I don't give a shit about marijuana in California. It really has nothing to do with what I'm talking about today. Um, but good for you. Happy New Year, though. Thanks for coming on. That's about it. I saved these plugs for the end. So I have my best of 2017 interviews. I have a domestic one and I have an international one. They're both in the description. I have the blog post. I have my latest video in Venezuela. I have all my links. The VidMe link doesn't work anymore because VidMe is gone. So see you guys later. And Feliz Año Nuevo.